And now we are extremely happy to introduce a series that will be running throughout the week on a new program that's bringing Israeli youth and young adults from various backgrounds to spend 3-week stints in a number of different communities in Israel and the occupied territories. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira, who joins me now in studio, spent time with participants in the Achi Israeli program over the past few months. Let's see first his report and then learn a little more.
העובדה שעכשיו סיימתי צבא, והשלב הבא זה לטייל בעולם, וסתם, איך אתה יכול ללכת לטייל בעולם לפני שאתה מטייל בארץ? אתה מכיר את הארץ שלך כאילו על בוריה?
In order to understand the other, you need to live like him. This mantra stands at the basis of Achi Israeli, a unique project which gathers Israelis from different sectors of the Israeli society who decided to leave their life behind for 3 months and live in 4 different areas, which in a way represent different communities of diverse Israel.
מה שאנחנו מציעים להם לעשות זה במקום להיפגש במקומות ניטרליים או לעשות איזשהו שיח קצר ושטחי שהרבה פעמים רק גורם יותר נזק כי הוא מתחדד יותר את העמדות ואתה מנסה לנצח את השני באיזה ויכוח. בואו ותנסו את השיטה שלנו. תצאו לרגע מהחיים שלכם, תעזבו את הכל מאחורה, תלכו נקיים להכיר את האחר במקום שלו, שבו הוא גר. זה בטוח ישנה את החיים שלכם.
The first stop is the city of Safed, considered one of the holiest cities for Jews. The group spends 3 weeks in the ultra-Orthodox community in the city. For some, like secular Jew Han from Ashkelon, this is the first time they have close relations with this closed traditional community.
ישר שאני חושבת על חרדים, אסוציאציה שלי זה ישר, אני עוברת ברחוב, לא צנועה, יריקות, עניינים. וזה היה דבר שהוא מאוד מפחיד והוא מאוד מרתיע. למרות שהוא חלק מהיהדות.
A difficult challenge also for Bilal, a young Muslim man who came from Deir al-Assad, only a few kilometers from Safed, but a whole new world for him.
לשבור סטיגמה זה המטרה. לפגוש אחד את השני, לשבור סטיגמה, להבין אחד את השני כמו בן אדם.
Safed, once considered a closed, extreme ultra-Orthodox community, has seemed to change course in the last few years. The city became a worldwide tourist attraction, drawing international celebrities like Madonna and Jean-Claude Van Damme, following the death of Kabbalah guru Rabbi Philip S. Berg and his burial in the city in 2013.
Sfat has this energy of peace that it brings. People are coming from all over the world to see that and to understand that.
Now the group is preparing for the dinner. After a long tour to the heart of Kabbalah, the group is chilling out and gaining strength for their next stop, the West Bank Jewish settlement of Ofra and the disputed outpost Amona.
Yes, and Uri Shapira, the author of this report, joins me in studio now. Uri, good morning.
Good morning, Ayman.
Uri, first maybe let's begin by explaining the motive of this project. Who's behind it? It's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, well, it's a private initiative. It's carried out by Hinam Center for Tolerance, Social Tolerance. It's totally private. The participants have to pay tuition fees, but it's also backed by the San Francisco Jewish Federation. So that's something interesting. I see it as an interesting social experience which examine all sorts of questions about identity, social identity and personal identity.
And it seems, Uri, this was one of the questions arising from your report, how identity is formed, how much of it is what we throw on our surroundings and what we receive from them. What's the makeup of every identity and every person is something these people are struggling with in your report.
You know, one question that popped out is the Israeli identity. What is Israel? What is the ultimate Israeli? And you know, in the early days of Israel, the main approach was the melting pot. And so it's like this image of the Sabra Israeli, mostly Jew. And nowadays we see a different approach of mosaic approach, a multicultural approach, different societies inside Israel living side by side.
And Uri, of course, the locations which you visited with this team are no coincidence. It's interesting to look at the religious history of Safed.
Yeah, well, Safed is one of the most important cities for Judaism. And we see a transition in Safed, you know, few years ago, I went to Safed. It was a completely different city. It was very close, very traditional. Now we see it's a tourist attraction for many people around the world, and I think the key for that is Kabbalah. Kabbalah became some kind of new age trend in the world, thanks to all kind of celebrities like Madonna we mentioned, Jean-Claude Van Damme. So yeah, it's really interesting to look at it. It's a beautiful city.
We will all certainly be looking forward to the next installment in this series. Uri Shapiro, thank you very much for bringing us the story and being with me this morning.
Thank you.
תקשיב, זה לצום רמדאן בו בעפרה רחוקה מההורים שלי, מהכפר שלי, מהאוויר של רמדאן. זה קצת קשה, אבל אני מסתדרת בו.
After 3 intense weeks in the ultra-Orthodox community in Safed, members of Achi Israeli are moving to their next destination, the West Bank Jewish settlement of Ofra. The journey caught the group during the first week of Ramadan, a holy month for Muslims, where they fast during the day and eat after night falls. The hot weather of June and the fact that they are surrounded by Jews who do not participate in Ramadan fasting made this journey even more challenging for Bilal and Asma, the 2 Muslim participants in the project.
אתה צם? כן. לא. אתה לא צם? לא. לא התרגלתם לאכול.
One person who does fast is Jewish participant Chen, who decided for the first and last time in her life to take the difficult challenge and get inside the head of her Muslim friends.
זה יותר חיבר אותי אליהם, וזה יותר נתן לי מחנה משותף להתחיל קצת לדבר איתם, ובאמת להגיע לחגיגות של העיד אל פיטר, ואולי להתלהב אפילו יותר, כי בוא'נה, אני באמת רעבה.
During their 3 weeks in Ofra, the group is introduced to the lifestyle of the Jewish settlers who live in a remote and disputed area, surrounded by Arab villages. This day, they take a day trip to the outpost of Amona, 3 kilometers from Ofra. In 2006, 9 houses were demolished here following a high court decision which ruled that the houses were built on Palestinian soil. The evacuation became violent, and the image of hundreds of settlers and right-wing supporters clashing with security forces is remembered as one of the traumatic events in the history of the settlements. Nowadays, the people of Amona, consisting of only several dozen families, are facing an even bigger threat after the Supreme Court decided to evacuate and demolish the entire outpost. The group received some input from Ofra's spokesman Aaron Lifkin, who's convinced the land belongs to the Jews and goes back to the biblical era to back up his claim.
We're standing near the slopes of Mount Baal Chatzor, where Abraham, my patriarch, stood there, and God promised him this land to his descendants, to me. I'm Abraham's descendant, and I believe in the Bible. I believe in that promise of God to Abraham. And so, you know, if people think that this is a disputed land, I have my Bible with me saying that it's not.
However, not everyone is convinced.
إسرائيل هي من الأساس كانت دولة فلسطينية وبعدين صارت إسرائيل.
Leaving politics and stigmas behind is perhaps the most demanding test here, especially in a week where 2 major terror attacks, one in Tel Aviv, the other one in Orlando, Florida, have once again shaken the delicate balance between the Muslim world and the West. For Shmuel, a Jewish participant, the challenge is double: to break the barriers and to convince his family who lives in the US to do the same.
You could understand the fear, that's all I'm saying. Like, you hear on the news, I don't know, a shooting in Orlando, you hear Palestinian terrorist attacks. You think, you're not hearing Arab and Israeli got along and had a good, nice conversation.
Later that day, the group goes down the hill back to their home base in Ofra. The burning sun and the Ramadan fasting are not getting in their way, and they gather for an Arabic lesson given by Asma. 2 weeks are left for them in Ofra, where they'll continue to live like Jewish settlers. The next stop, the northern Arab village of Deir el-Assad.
Uri, a beautiful report there.
Thank you so much.
You spent some time with both the Palestinian and Jewish youth, a very unlikely encounter. Tell us a bit about the personal experience they had?
I think this time in Ofra and Amona, it was perhaps the most difficult time from the entire project because it's a political dispute, of course, and everybody has a side in it. As much as they try to avoid it, it was particularly hard for Bilal and Asma, the two Arab participants there. You know, they try to fast their Ramadan and practice their faith, and you could feel that they feel uncomfortable during this conversation. They a little bit talked about how they consider the land as Palestinian, but then again, when I asked Bilal afterwards, he said that he thinks the place should not be demolished.
A big political and religious divide very quickly. How are they able to overcome this and spend so much time together and find a human kind of a parallel?
Overall, you know, it's all human beings, you know. They found out that there are persons behind these agendas. And this is a major political dispute in Israel now. You know, last week, Israeli government suggested to remove Amona to another place. Now it's kind of contradicting what the U.S. stands for. The U.S. condemned these plans. They said it's against what Netanyahu promised to Obama. So we have to see the developments.
A very unlikely encounter at a very tense political time, both internally and externally. Ori Shapira, thank you very much. We look forward to your next report.
Thank you.
And that wraps up the morning edition here on I-24 News. We'll be back here tomorrow morning. Thank you for watching.
A lot of times in certain places that will raise kids to be like, the Arabs are lucky to even be here, kind of a thing. And then you learn their side and it's like, no, it's not that they're lucky. This is the reality. Like, they live here, they have a story, they're connected to the land like we're connected to the land.
Night falls on the Arab village Deir el-Assad as members of Achi Israeli group prepare for the annual Eid al-Fitr parade. They've spent 2 intense weeks living in the Muslim community in the Galilee, and the village is celebrating the end of the holy Muslim month of Ramadan with a colorful rally. For Oria, an Orthodox Jew who's just finished his military service, the experience of living in an Arab village is challenging.
נלחמנו כי לא היה ברירה וכי ירו לנו על יישובים ולא רצינו ומצד שני, אוקיי, עברנו שלב ועכשיו אין ברירה, צריך לנסות לחיות ביחד, אחרי שהרגנו אחד את השני, צריך לחיות ביחד.
For Bilal, a Muslim member of the group, the celebration has a special meaning this year. After he spent nearly 2 months with the group in Jewish-dominant areas, including the West Bank settlement of Ofra, he has returned to his hometown.
אני חושב שזה קצת מוזר ליהודי להיות בכפר אביב ולהסתובב פה, אבל כן, הם מתמודדים ואני חושב שעכשיו בתהלוכה עוד מעט, תהלוכת החג פשוט יהיו שמחים.
Despite the uplifting atmosphere, politics could not remain outside of the group. Not during a highly sensitive month, which saw a series of terror attacks inside Israel and the West Bank.
אפשר להרגיש את האי-נעימות בחדר. אם קורה כזה מקרה היום, ופתאום אתה יודע, ההודעה שלה בוויינט קופצת לך על המסך בטלפון, ואתה מסתכל על זה בדיוק, ויושב לידך בחור ערבי, ברור שיש אי-נעימות.
Fighting prejudice and old fears was once again a main theme here in this session. The group attended numerous meetings, lectures and presentations, all related to the Muslim culture, language and heritage. Sometimes understanding the small details in the Muslim culture can change a perspective, as the head of the community center in town explains.
מילה אכבר בחברה הישראלית היהודית זה מילה של מישהו שהולך להתפצץ עוד מעט. ביום הזה זה מילת חג.
Located in the northern Galilee district, Deir el-Assad has a long history that goes back to the Crusader period. In 1962, some of the village's lands were confiscated for the Jewish town Carmiel. However, the two cities live in peace with each other. After the rally is finished, the members of the group return to their regular routine. Their next destination will also be their final one, the Ethiopian community in the central city of Rehovot.
And we're joined by Shmuel Erblich from Bet Shemesh, a participant of this program. Shmuel, good morning to you. I'd love to hear your personal experience visiting the Arab village in the north and generally what it's like to be in this program.
Good morning. It was a great experience. I mean, they hosted us very nicely. You know, Arabs have a very warm they host very warmly, it was good.
And Shmuel, one of the interesting things I just saw in the report, which I think you heard, was the term Allah Akbar, which in Israel has a very charged reaction. People hear Allah Akbar and it embeds fear, whereas this is a term of celebration. What do you think of this? Could this be reversed?
I mean, I don't personally feel that. Like, I've always known, like, since I was a kid, that Allah Akbar means God is great, and we both do believe in the same God. So it wasn't from, like, the people I know, it wasn't such a big whoa, like.
And very, very shortly, do you think participating in this sort of very unique program can or has changed people's views, those who took part?
Of course. There's also knowing something by seeing it on, you can see it on TV, stigmas, whatever. You can see interviews with people and try to get yourself an image of some sort of person. But until you actually spend through, like, a couple weeks with the community and actually get to know it from within, then you'll understand it. And if there's more understanding, there's more, talking, and that needs to be happening.
And this is something that you would, let's say, recommend to everyone to take part in, maybe to break stigmas and barriers.
Of course, 100%. And we have so many, and it's very easy to find them everywhere.
Shmuel Erbrich from Bet Shemesh, a participant of Achi Israeli, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And that wraps up the morning edition here on I24 News. For anything else, you can find us online, i24news.tv. Of course, follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. We'll be back here tomorrow morning with all the news that you cannot miss. Thank you for watching.
The first program, you reach a new place, you don't know, you've never lived there, and it's new and it eventually becomes home. At the end of the month, it becomes home. Here, I felt just like I was coming back home.
Members of Achi Israeli group are reaching their final destination. After 3 months in different locations in Israel, they are now spending 3 weeks inside the Ethiopian community in Rehovot, central Israel. In this community garden, some of the elderly get the chance to practice agriculture, a field they are familiar with from their homeland. For Cher, who was born in Israel, it was an insightful experience in which he learned about the difficulties of the Ethiopian Jews in Israel.
האנשים שדיברנו איתם, שמספרים על חוויות מאוד מאוד אישיות, לא משהו שאתה שומע בחדשות, ואז מרחיבים לך ומנפחים לך, ואתה לא יודע מה האמת ומה שקר, ומה זה חצי המנגינה העצובה שמתנגנת מאחורה, אלא אנשים שפשוט מספרים. אני הולך ככה, והמשטרה ישר פונה אליי.
Most of the Ethiopian Jews came to Israel in the mid-1980s and 1990s, but many of them still face discrimination, suspicion, and sometimes even police brutality.
מרגיש בעצם שאנחנו להסתובב חופשי בכל מקום.
Last year, a series of mass protests drew media attention in Israel. Subsequently, a report about police brutality towards minorities was published on August 2016 and returned the issue to public discussion. Muhammad, an Israeli Arab from Deir el-Assad who participates in the program, many of the claims sound familiar.
זה דבר שהוא גם קורה אצלנו, אצל הקהילה הערבית.
For Galia, returning to this community is a corrective emotional experience. Last year she was a member of Achi Israeli's first session, and now she has returned as one of the organizing crew. She recalls a difficult welcome by the Ethiopian community.
The youth mostly felt like we came in a patronizing mode. That's obviously not the intention of the project. Honestly, our goal is to get to know every person for who they are and understand the struggles and the triumphs of each community.
These are the last days of the program. Members of Achi Israeli are getting ready to say goodbye. But even after 3 intense months of living in and getting to know the different parts of Israeli society, questions of identity continue to occupy the members of the group.
You can't describe Israel. If people try to describe Israel, it's the biggest mistake. You know, and if you go to one part of the country, you could think this, and then you go to another part, you think something completely different.
זה מאוד ערער אותי מבחינת איפה המקום שלי בכל הדבר הזה. מי אני? כאילו, חשבתי שאני ישראלית, חשבתי שאני יהודייה מסורתית, חשבתי שאני הרבה מאוד דברים שקצת התערערו, כי ברגע שאתה פוגש אנשים שיש בהם כל כך הרבה אש למה שהם ומי שהם, וכל אחד אומר, זה ישראלי, זה ישראלי, זה ישראלי, אז קצת קשה למצוא את המקום שלך, אבל באיזשהו מקום זה גם מאוד חיבר אותי לעובדה שכן, אנחנו כור היתוך.
Despite its small size and population, Israel makes for one of the most interesting and diverse countries in the world. Perhaps 3 months are not enough to understand this country, but for many in the Achi Israeli project, it was the first step to a long journey to come.
And joining us now via Skype is Barak Luzon, Director for Israel and the Global Network at the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, which sponsored and steered the project. Good morning to you. Well, good evening or very early in the morning for you. And thank you for joining us. It's a unique experience, especially in Israel, where communities are very much separated socially. Tell us about the project from your end.
So thank you for having me. The project from our end is actually one major, quite extraordinary exemplar of what's probable in the Israeli society. We're facing such a ongoing fragmentation and segmentation within the Israeli society. And as part of a federation who really aimed at strengthening Israel as a pluralistic and democratic society with equal opportunities for all its citizens, Hinam and Achi Israeli are the right way, from our perspective, to bring people together, not telling them what to do and how to feel, but rather giving a platform for different people to come up and figure it out together by themselves.
And are you looking to replicate this format in other areas? It's interesting that San Francisco is looking at the Israeli society. What about other areas?
Well, definitely. So we are, the San Francisco Federation is active, domestically in San Francisco, working with the Jews in the Bay Area, and not only the Jewish community, and also is part of a larger Jewish community around the world and feels part of it. Therefore, a major percentage of its allocation is actually, goes out from San Francisco, working, with Jews in Budapest and in Berlin and in Warsaw and the former Soviet Union and other places in the world. In Israel, we really intend on expanding the idea of Achi Israeli and Hinam to Israeli campuses, to Jerusalem, to the city of course, the city of law, the city of, other cities and major places where the different tribes of Israel are already together, but they just coexist. They don't really interact.
Exactly. Important to emphasize and know that it's not only for the Jewish community. Barak Luzon, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.